know, maybe a week or two
so
back.
Embarrassing.
Approximately. Should I continue?
Go ahead, continue to lie. Please.
What are we? What is he lying about?
Everything. You asked to go, you wanted to my best friend. You told Cameron and Cameron lied about it. Tell me that we were in the hot tub together. Cameron, is that true or is it not? I don't expect you to tell the truth at this point. I don't.
What's the accusation?
That he was f***ing other people.
What? So first you just said I wanted to someone else. Then you just said now I actually did someone else. Which one was it?
But either way, you're in a marriage, Brendan. It doesn't matter.
I never anyone. I never said I wanted anyone. I don't know what
Cameron
you're
said
talking
you
about.
wanted my best friend, both Austin
You
and
just
Cam.
admitted before that rumor was clearly not true.
Doesn't matter.
It literally doesn't matter with you two.
Remember
Facts don't matter.
Welcome back to Ash's Reality Recaps. I have been waiting a week for this episode. Married at First Sight, the Denver Reunion Part 2. Now, why have I been looking forward to this? Well, first and foremost, looking at some of the comments in the last video, I came on and basically said everybody up on stage besides Michael and Chloe are guilty of being involved in this fraud and these lies, and that remains true. But I pointed out that Claire looked like the figurehead, the spearhead, the main conspirator of this whole process. One, because of her background in psychology, being a therapist, and two, because she just has that inside track of being able to know how to manipulate individuals. I got called out a little bit in the comments by, I think, a couple people, but for the most part, everybody else saw the exact same thing I saw. I was just hoping that Claire and Emily and the ladies would kind of cover themselves and not continue to get on that path. But I was completely blown away with the behavior of mainly Claire and Emily. Throughout this episode, they became the mean girls, they became the bullies, they became the attackers. And I hope that at some point, Lauren and Becca see the manipulation that's coming from Claire and they separate themselves from that environment. It doesn't look that way because we saw a preview of next week, which we thought the show was over, but we saw a preview of next week, which is Where Are They Now? And look, Chloe, and she comes up and she basically says these girls just don't want to move on. Like they're just poking the bear at this point. So it just shows me that they're not willing to move on. It shows me that Claire has her hands so deep in Emily mentally that I feel for Emily and where Emily's mentality is going to go once she realizes that Claire is completely railroading her. But that's beside the point. This episode was packed full of anger, aggression, Emily was attacking Kevin, the host, and it got ugly. And throughout the entire episode, the men, again, they're just as to blame. So don't make me out being like, oh, I'm supporting the men. I'm not supporting the men. They're all just as guilty. They all supported whatever this craziness was. I'm sure between the lines, they were involved in creating this, narrative on how this was going to go. There's not one single person on here that was like, all right, we're going to do A, B, C, and D. They came together. They agreed on this decision, and they went forward with it. And why do I feel that Claire, Cameron, Emily, and Brendan are the core? Just look at how emotionally distraught Becca and Austin are. Becca is just emotional this entire episode, and you can see that she has some kind of reservations about everything that happened. She's not speaking up about it. She knows that she's not going to step into that bear trap of Claire, whatever Claire has going on there. Austin, we already know Austin screwed up big time. You can see that in Austin. He walks away from the show a couple of times during this episode for being sick, whatever reason. But look, Austin says numerous times off camera, he made mistakes. He know he makes mistakes. He know if he'd have trusted the process, it probably could have worked out for him and Becca. But he got sucked into this whole drama with the rest of them, and he know he screwed up. Flat out. He know he screwed up. He apologized for it. He's still guilty. Becca, she's still guilty for what went on in this. I feel like this episode, she's dialed back and separated herself a little bit from this whole Claire tornado, whatever it is. But for the most part, Claire and Emily, look, the mean girls, they're going to get that internet attraction. They're going to have thousands of followers on Instagram or whatever, just because, that's what they're creating for themselves. It's kind of a shame. It's kind of sad. The guys called him out. At one point, Brennan basically said, look, this is a reality show, but I'm a human. I'm human beyond this reality show. Like, I didn't know that it was going to be this in-depth and this, drastic into my life, and I wasn't prepared for it. I'm not going to support the guy because on camera through production, they truly made this guy out to look like he was mentally abusive of Emily. And we, who knows at this point what extent that was. One thing that they did not touch on during either part of the reunion episodes, if you recall, is at one point when Brennan and Emily are having dinner together, they get into the conversation. It was after the whole accident where Emily thinks that they're going down a good path and things are working out. And Brennan basically says, well, I'm not attracted to you. Like, nothing's changed. I just want to be friends with you. And she kind of called him out on it. He said, look, if you'd have listened to me at the beginning of this, week 2, we wouldn't be in this position because I told you I wasn't attracted to you, but you begged me to stay so that you could experience the process. That right there throws a huge dart into this whole conspiracy theory on where some of this is coming from. Obviously, Emily was involved in it from the beginning and getting to Brennan to stay. Brennan didn't want to stay. He didn't care about the notoriety. He wasn't there for any of that, but she basically threatened him, in his words, who knows, and it come out in the conversation, and she did not deny it, that she asked him and begged him to stay on the show so that she could experience the process. So she is absolutely guilty in this entire process as well. Claire, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to begin with Claire. Again, her background specializes in knowing how people tick. I mean, that's what she is. But none of the experts, when they were on the stage last night, questioned that or called her out on any of that. So I would have liked to have seen that because her background allows her to manipulate individuals. I'm not going to get too much into the Cameron aspect because he pulled out his little EKG, which was his receipt, which showed, to Kevin that he had to be shocked back to life 3 times, like flatlining. They didn't do a close-up on that, so there's no medical people out there. I'm definitely not a medical person that could have looked at that and really broke down what was on that piece of paper and to what reality that stood if he did flatline, the whole being shocked back to life or whatever. But look, if that is the case, if this man truly went to the hospital because of the stress associated with this show and the stress that possibly came from Claire's pressure on him, and he had to be shocked back to life 3 times, how in the world can you tell me that this man's lying and manipulating everybody when he spent the majority of the end of the season in the hospital? It just doesn't make any sense, does it? During the course of this, as the host was asking questions, and he basically asked Brennan, what can I do to decide who's telling the truth and who's not? And Brennan said, just ask him more questions. The more questions you ask him, the more it changes. And if you saw the clip at the beginning of this, that's exactly what it come down to. Initially, Brennan wanted to have sex with their friends, and then he was. And then they admitted that that was a lie. And they said, what does it matter anyhow? You're married. Anything that they said between Claire and Emily that came out of their mouths at that point didn't make any sense because they just contradicted themselves over and over and over again. And it got to the point where the guys basically just had to sit there and take it. They wasn't getting stressed out. They wasn't getting combative because they knew that they was on the losing side of this regardless, as however the argument went, because the ladies were just going to keep hounding him and beating him and pushing at it and being emotional and going a whole 9 yards. But real quick, let me just show a couple quick clips of Claire's body language during the course of this where Emily is just losing her mind and Claire is just sitting back enjoying the show. That's what is the telling tale in this episode, and who I feel should probably take the most of the brunt of what happened this season. Again, they are all guilty. Every single one of them is guilty, except for Michael and Chloe. They wasn't involved in any of this. Chloe actually did an incredible thing. She stepped up and, kind of chastised all of them and said it's hard to see the amount of anger and hate that was on this stage. But look, they gamed the system and they all paid the price. And unfortunately, we had to watch the worst season in Married at First history. And now we've got to hold our breath and decide if we're going to, watch Chicago. Because the preview of Chicago didn't give me the warm and fuzzies that I want to sit through another season of something like this. But let's go ahead and look at Claire's body language. Let's jump into this. Like, here's a perfect example. What do you see here? Distraught, focused. Distraught, focused. She's plotting how she's going to reach out and touch her arm, how she's going to reassure. Numerous times throughout this episode, she says, prior to this, I told the ladies. Prior to this, I told the girls. Her therapy or ability to be a therapist took over her ability to be a person as part of the show. And she basically went through this entire season as a therapist for these other girls and completely derailed their mentalities. Brennan actually said at one point, the biggest regret I have this season is getting Emily and Claire to be friends because Emily hated Claire. Emily hated Claire, and Brennan had to convince her to be friends with Claire. And now look what Claire is doing to Emily. I feel bad for Emily. I really, really do. And this is exactly what I was talking about. She sat there, she thought about how she was going to react to it, and then she reached over and put the head down. Because it looks fantastic to be that nourishing person, that motherly figure. Emily's just falling right into the freaking trap. It's disgusting. Like, what is this? What is this? This is what I'm talking about. The behavior of Claire throughout the majority of this episode just doesn't fit the narrative that the girls are trying to portray. I'm not going to keep saying it, but just look. Claire needs to look in a mirror and realize what she did to these ladies in this season. They're all guilty. I'm going to reiterate that. They're all guilty for being part of this farce. But somebody is at the beginning of this that's turning the screws and pushing the knobs. And there's only one person up on that stage during these 2 episodes that just has that focus in her eyes. There's emotion, tears, everything from everybody else. But Claire's the only one that is that 1,000-yard stare where she's looking like a chess player of what she's going to do next. Rewatch the episode and tell me I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know how you feel. They could have showed this episode, last 2 episodes, part 1 of the reunion and part 2 of the reunion, and they were more entertaining than the entire season, especially now knowing that what we felt the entire season, that something was off, was absolutely off, and they all choreographed the entire thing. The reunion, it's just one of them things where, again, Kevin had more information than he was sharing. None of the cast wanted to be honest. The gentleman actually did apologize to the experts. Becca apologized to the experts. Claire and Emily had nothing to say. Lauren, she was playing poker. I don't know where she was at, but more power to her. I thought she was a pretty good person throughout this entire season, and she played a great poker hand throughout these 2 reunion parts where she called Cameron out when she wanted to call Cameron out about the dresses, and outside of that, she wasn't sharing more information than she needed to. And look, she's not gonna fall for the bait so that she gets sucked into all this disaster. She gets tied up into some stuff by, it looks like, next week. We'll jump into that next week. But lo and behold, that is Married at First Sight Denver Reunion Part 2. We still have 1 more episode to go, apparently. The girls make a ghost account and bash Chloe. I don't know. Somehow she gets sucked into all this as well. But absolute worst season that has ever been on Married at First Sight. I'll hold my breath for Chicago. I'll give it a try and see what happens. But if it's anything like this season, the show's just got to go away at this point. It's a shame. I feel like production, the crew, the team, the experts, they've got to do something about this episode, this season, just how these individuals just railroaded the entire process. It was disturbing. It was disgusting. And unfortunately, we all had to watch it. And looking at the comments and looking at other people's comments out there, a lot of us feel the same way, that this was just the worst season out there. So thanks for tuning in to Ash's Reality Recaps. That's me standing on a soapbox for this episode. See y'all next week.